Hey guys, what's up? It's Stanley Kubrick here, investigating your favorite albums. And yes, tonight I'm going to be watching 2001: A Space Odyssey for the first time in my life on a big screen, so that's really cool. But that's not related to this review at all, because today I'm going to be doing an album review on the new Swans album, The Beggar. So, Swans, based in New York, I believe, is one of the most important underground rock bands of all times period, and also one of my personal favorites. Obviously, before the mid 90s, they have been extremely active and they have been putting out one after another extremely well made, experimental, creative weird, bizarre rock music. Of course, we have amazing albums like White Light from the Mouth of Infinity, The Great Annihilator, and the epic, bold, extremely groundbreaking soundtracks for the blind. I mean, the track Helpless Child still remains to be one of the greatest rock tracks of the entire 90s. And then they took a bit of a hiatus, a 15, 16-year-ish hiatus until they returned gloriously in the 2010s with My Father Will Guide Me Up a Rope to the Sky. And while it is a much more updated rock album, the production is a lot better, a lot more tasteful. Still, the music doesn't really shine through all that much. But that is until the Swans have reached a peak in their creative heights in their career with the trilogy, which is The Seer, To Be Kind, and The Glowing Man. And these albums are the albums that got me into Swans because Fantana reviewed them, I know, but also just the grossness and the dirtiness and wilderness of The Seer, the incredibly grand, crushing, visceral, spiritual experience that is To Be Kind, and the more meditative, cerebral, intellectual, also equal parts epic Glowing Man. And then after this, we all thought that Swans will quit because they said that The Glowing Man would be their last album. But obviously, that's not the case because in 2019 they released Leaving Meaning, which is a slight change of musical directions. Instead of the epic, bold, long music that they are known for, Leaving Meaning, while still very long, focuses more on the folky, more singer-songwriter aspects. And it still worked for the most part. Surely it's not one of the most well-made Swans albums, in my opinion. I still think Leaving Meaning has a great deal of well-written tracks where Michael Girard, the frontman of the band, really pour his heart out with some of the most poetic and thought-provoking lyrics that he has written. So now we have The Beggar. And this album has been one of the most highly anticipated albums in the last few years. And in fact, I think last year, Swans has already made an announcement that they're releasing a new album called Is There Really a Mind? But that never really came out. That became The Beggar, and it came out this year. And this album is quite special because this album really feels like their actual final album, because this album essentially deals with death and mortality, and particularly the death and mortality of frontman and headman Michael Girard. And essentially, it is like David Bowie's Black Star, but instead of David Bowie, it's Michael Girard. Now, okay, here's my opinion of The Beggar. I have mixed feelings on it. And so going to the album, I had some pretty high expectations, and unfortunately, those expectations weren't met. Now, yeah, you're just, if you're watching this right now, you may blame me and say, oh, you're just copying Fantano's review, because yesterday he released the album review and gave it a 7, and it's like I'm copying him, but I swear to God, I did not. Like 3 days ago, I called my good friend Retablo, and I already told him that I have mixed feelings about this album. And even a few days ago on Rate Your Music, I already gave this album a rating. So, yeah, I really did take some time to digest this album. Now, as expected of any Swans albums, this album is really long. It's 2 hours long, and it takes a lot of time for me to digest. this album, so I couldn't review this album like right off the bat after its release. It took me a few listens to really get into it and finalize my opinions. But yeah, it is a lot, and ultimately, unfortunately, very, very unfortunately, I tried really, really hard to love this album. It's just not that great in my opinion, but it's still really good. So track by track, we have the album opener, The Parasite, which is a super slow paced intro track, which I don't mind. And coming from Swans, it's really normal. You get the dejected, dusty guitars. Michael Girard gives some really expressive and theatrical vocals. We have these swelling strings underneath, which is a great tone setter. But my issue with this track is that in 8.5 minutes, it's been building up and up and up. And I just feel like it doesn't really build up to anything. So this intro track just comes off a little weak. I wouldn't mind if this is like a deep cut, like in the middle of the album, but as an intro track, it just doesn't really hit that hard for me. I do really like the lyrics though. Breathe my breath into your head, righteous, pure, and sour with death. Here I am, just empty skin. There is no way out, there is no way in. Crucified and fractured fields of blue. All information is equally true. So in this track, and in the rest of the album, he comments on his art and his relationship with his listeners, but also death, and death like a parasite slowly consuming him. Now, afterwards, we have the track Paradise is Mine, which is one of the lead-up singles to this album, and in my opinion is a pretty standard Swans track. There is nothing all that groundbreaking about this track, but still, a standard Swans track is a great track. It's still a track that I really, really like. We get some slow-moving drums, some dirty krautrockian guitar licks, tingling triangles, and some unnerving lyrics. And then halfway through the track, we get these kooky woo, woo, background vocals, which add a lot of personality. And also towards the end of the track, we have these refrains. Is there really a mind? Is there really a mind? Which is, of course, the original title for this album. And the repetitiveness and the dirtiness and the bizarreness of this track really makes this track sound like it's straight off of The Seer or something. So obviously, I really enjoyed it. Following that, we have Los Angeles, City of Death. And that's true. That is true. I'm in LA right now, and every day I wake up, I feel like I want to die. So, yeah, this is a straightforward 3.5 minute long track, and it is unnaturally short for Swans to make a 3.5 minute long track. The guitars, in my opinion, are a little bit drab, and the noisy, clunky riffs sound good, but I feel like they would have sounded way better if there is a stronger and longer build-up to this track. I low-key wish this track is 7 minutes or 8 minutes long, because this track feels like a snippet from an actually super long track, if you know what I mean. Following that, we have Michael is Done, which is a self-referencing track. Obviously, Michael is done. Michael's singing about himself. And there's something really artistically impressive about artists that comment on themselves, like Charlie Kaufman on Adaptation, or, throwing it back, Caravaggio in his paintings. Hey, since Michael Girard is such an art expertise and such a cinephile, might as well throw in references like this. But on this track, he contemplates his own mortality in a very bold and artistic way. Of course, you get the tinkly triangles and the whispery vocals from Michael Girard and another female vocal duetting him. And it slowly builds to a blissful, heavenly climax with stargazy guitars and springing percussion. It sounds gorgeous. And of course, we get the lyrics. Now Michael is done, stripped bare of pretense, soaking his sheets while counting insects, which could have been a reference to the time a couple years ago he fell off a roof because of a wasp. He's a grit on the sun, he's the hate and the love, every hole is a leak when Michael does speak. Now, after that, we have Unforming, where it really feels like the guy died. Yeah, it really feels like he passed away and his soul is leaving his body. And musically, it is this beautiful and moving, stripped back lullaby, especially with the refrains at the end: freedom from fear, freedom from fear. He's finally free because he's finally out of this world and there's no fear anymore. Kind of reminds me of that Nina Simone quote, what is freedom? No fear. And again, we have the lyrics, where do I end? I don't think this is me. Well, I think that I'm thinking, but there's too much to know. It seems that I'm shrinking while I continue to grow. Really vivid and beautiful depiction of the soul leaving his body. It's almost like it actually happened to him. And then we have the title track, The Beggar, which is a 10-minute track. It's atmospheric, dirty, and strange, full of reverby wailing guitars and a pulsating bass. And while, again, I think this is pretty standard for Swans, there's nothing all that groundbreaking about this track, but I guess standard Swans is still good Swans, and it still sounds pretty fantastic. And then, of course, we have No More of This, which is a track about finality and goodbyes. No more of this, no more of this earthly matters, you know. And he also gives a beautiful, hopeful spoken word at the end saying goodbye lovers, goodbye friends. The whole track is so peaceful and beautiful and serene. It's amazing. Musically, it doesn't wow me or anything, but lyrically and conceptually and thematically, I think this is pretty great. And then after that, we have Ebbing, which is, in my opinion, my favorite track at 11 minutes long. We get some acoustic guitars that are very sweet and lively. I feel like a little child again, skipping around a field of grass and flowers with nothing to worry about. This is incredibly gorgeous and heavenly, and of course we have an epic climax that is noisy and dense, but instead of being unnerving and disturbing, it's more heavenly. It's like we have finally embraced our mortality and we are at the gates of heaven and we're embracing death with open arms, and there's just something so satisfying and cathartic about this. And finally, disc 1 ends off with Why Can't I Have What I Want Anytime I Want? We get some cinematic guitars that are very dark and unhinged, and some constant drums, but in my opinion this track just kind of ends off kind of weak. I wish Ebbing would be the last track of disc 1. In fact, Ebbing is so damn cathartic that I wish it's the last track of the whole album. This track, in comparison, gives off some cliffhanger vibes, kind of like Some Things We Do off of To Be Kind. But then again, Ebbing is much stronger of a closer, in my opinion. So this track just kind of sticks out like an afterthought. So that's disc 1. Now we move on to disc 2, the second half of the album. And the second half only has 2 tracks, because the first track, The Beggar Lover parenthesis 3, is a 43-minute long epic track, and it is kind of like a montage of every musical idea Michael Girard has in his mind. It starts off with some dense layers of strings. It's like when an orchestral performance starts and all the violins and cellos have to play A to tune their sound. It's sort of like that. And then we have a spoken word from Michael Girard's wife. We have some flowery background vocals a la A Piece of Sky. We have some fluttering drums that are unnerving, kind of ambient, kind of scary, and that leads into some eerie screaming slide whistles that sounds like it came off of a horror film. And then following that, we have some hypnotizing psychedelic guitar drum passage that I really love, and then some angelic choir vocals, and then birds chirping, but it sounds like it is digitally made with electronic production, some thumping percussions, and then you get them essentially interpolating their own music all over again. We get the off of the Glowing Man, and then they also interpolated Cloud of Unknowing. Finally, Peace, It's Coming, It's Real, Leaving meaning the title track. And then following that, we have some disturbing squeaky noises, and then at the very end, we have Michael's child singing. So again, this 43-minute long track, while not beautifully arranged and not that powerful and impactful, because of how all over the place it is, at least it is a very interesting sonic representation of everything that's going on in Michael Girard's mind. It's almost like his life is flashing before his eyes and or before his ears, I would say, and now we're just going through the journey with him, and his wife, his kids, and his disturbing dark moments, his angelic heavenly moments, and all the musical journey that he's gone through in the last few years. And it is a really interesting track, and I end up really liking the concept of this track a lot. And the album ends off with the Memorious, which is, in my opinion, kind of an epilogue type track. And my first speculation about the track is that it is about art and the creation of art, and I see this as kind of a Michael Giroir's gratitude towards the band, like, thank you, Swans, for making music with me. But upon closer inspection of the lyrics, apparently it is about working in a copper mine, because Michael Giroir, when he was young, actually worked at a copper mine in Israel. And I don't know why, but that happened apparently. And I guess this is sort of like one final memory to go through when his entire life is flashing before his eyes. The instrumentals pretty much stay the same throughout the 8.5 minute long duration, with the pounding drums and the cycling guitar licks, but lyrically it's still very interesting, and it's kind of head scratch that this is the album ending. Usually Swan's album endings are really well made endings. They really sound like endings, like the To Be Kind ending track that is incredibly dark and harrowing and sorrowful, or Finally Peace, which is also a fantastic ending. But yeah, I guess that's the end of the album. So yeah, overall, this new Swans album, I'm not that huge on it, unfortunately. There are some amazing moments here and there, but instrumentally, it's just not up to par with some of the best work that I know Swans for. How about the incredibly dirty, grotesque, and wildly ambitious She Loves Us? Or the heavenly, sweet, watery A Piece of the Sky? Or what if we're talking about something like Helpless Child, with the very dark and thought-provoking and toxic, poisonous lyrics? Unfortunately, I can't find those things on this album. And yeah, this is more of a meditative album. It's a meditation on mortality and death. But if you want to go through Swans being meditative, The Glowing Man would be a great meditation. So yeah, at the end, I'm not that impressed about this album. Even some of the ballads off of Leaving Meaning has more of a sweet, memorable hook to them than on this album. So yeah, but I appreciate and highly respect Michael Giroir for making this album for himself, and it's really what he thinks and feels and nothing else in musical format, which I really, really appreciate. So yeah, I'm giving the new Swans album, The Beggar, a decent 7 out of 10. And again, if you think I'm copying Fantano, I'm not. I swear. I called my friend a few days ago saying that I have mixed feelings about this album. And if you look at my Rate Your Music, yes, I rated this album like 4 days ago on Rate Your Music already. So, yeah. So, have you listened to the new Swans album? Comments below, let me know, subscribe if you want more. And thanks for watching. Sheesh, what a long review.